Everyone can see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we can start recording. If you present. No. Okay. All right. We can start.
Okay.
Okay. Is it good?
Good to go.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Rita Pino. For those of you that don't know me, I'm going to do a small introduction on this topic. We are talking about talking to your kids before it matters. Now, I kind of want to define before mattering. Before means before something big. Before it means before something traumatic. Before means before the big stuff, the stuff that really changes and forms the brain. So we're going to touch upon that. We're going to come into a lot of different topics, and I will be moving around a little bit, but all of these are well fleshed out sort of ideas and concepts that are backed up by empirical science, that are backed up by public opinion and prevention education standards. So we will sort of get into that. My background and where I'm coming from, I always do this as part of my presentations because it is a parenting presentation. And I don't know about anyone else, but I don't necessarily look the age where I would have children or that I'd have very young children. So I just wanted to point out that I am a prevention educator. I'm certified in teaching LST, TEFL, and I have a BA in Global Studies, American Studies, and Political Science. I am a parent. I adopted 2 girls at the age of 19. They are 9 and 12, and they are middle school and pre-adolescent. So they are my nieces. And we take it day by day. We do what we can. So we'll move on from there. So I also do this. Why this presentation? This is not to scare you. There will be information that's in here that may be new and exciting and daunting and create nervousness and anxiety, but those are all things that are part of learning something new and introducing concepts into your world. This is not to scare you. This is to inform you. This is not a parenting class. So you are the best parent for your child. You know them best. You have been with them since more than day one. They are who they are, and you are their parent. So I'm not saying that you're doing a bad job or that, anything else, but these are tools that can help you expand your knowledge and put in your toolkit when you are interacting with children of any age. So this is also perspective. My approach is shaped by my learning experience. So with this learning experience, we will sort of flesh out some of the ideas. I do come from a global background, so I think globally and I start to integrate them locally. So we'll get into it. Now, first thing, I want you to think about the children that you interact with on an everyday basis. How old are the children you interact with? How well do you know them? Are you concerned for them? And how do you talk to them? What do you talk to them about? And when do you talk to them? So when is a really important point that we're trying to make? Are they acting up when you're talking to them? Is it a negative or positive experience? And a lot of this is information that's not critical, but it will be information that you would want to refer back to when we are going through this presentation, because it's helpful for us to reflect on the things that matter and concepts that we're going to explore today. So there's that. Now, I do want to talk about the pitfalls of don'ts and no's. So we're going to do a small exercise. And we have our cameras off for a reason, but just think about this for a second and try to follow these demands succinctly and consecutively in order. Don't stand up. Don't look at me. Don't look at anything except what's ahead of you. Now, if you are hearing these, you have to process them. That's something that your brain has to do. Now, what is the point that I'm trying to make? For us, it is easier to process, but if you have 3 consecutive orders in a row, then children who are listening don't necessarily don't necessarily process these demands the same way. And they are confusing, even to adults sometimes. And especially if I would like to have done this in a classroom setting where I could sit with people and sort of illustrate how difficult these things might be. But in reality, because it is so difficult, children are confused by this because they have to process the negative part. So it's not just a positive, like stand up, okay, stand up. Or, look straight ahead, please. Those kinds of things. Those are one-way answers. But when you have something that is negative, when you have negative demands, then those negativities are something that they have to double process. So it says, stand up, but I don't have to. So they go to the positive first, and then they process the negative. And so if we're not clear on those types of things, it can be difficult for them to process. So when you are disciplining children or when you're interacting with children in general, there are 4 things that this parenting expert kind of talks about. I have the link here. It's just an article that says parenting without saying no, but you are in charge of their safety, their health issues, their performance in school and extracurriculars and commitment to extracurriculars, and preparation for adulthood. Now, that's obviously a lot of things, but that doesn't include everything. Children are sentient beings. They do make decisions on their own. They are forming people. They have brains that make decisions based around the environment that they are in. So it's not just us telling them what they are, it's them understanding what they are based on their environment. So there's that. And the next slide will be a little bit, I don't want to say controversial. I just want to say that it will be something that's thought-provoking. So we'll touch on that in a second. But if we are talking about alternatives to no, there are some things here that we need to address. So if you say stop hitting, you can say instead, please keep your hands to yourself. If you say don't say that, you can say please choose another word. Or you can say quit whining and crying. And then you can say instead, please use your words. So this graph is on the website there. So if you would like me to share the slides, then you can have access to that as well. But it is just nice to reframe your negatives so that the parenting language helps the child understand what their expectations are. So here we go. Now, power imbalance. And I do want to talk about power imbalance for a second, not because, we're going to be talking about power, we're going to be talking about struggle, we're going to be talking about justice. It's not necessarily like that. It's just that authority and power always exists in every relationship that we ever have. And that's not to say that we are whims to the power of people that are above us, or that we have absolute power for the people below us in these social situations. It's just to say that, maybe if we think about respect and authority in a different lens, then we can sort of make waves in what we really need to get down to, which is helping children grow up in a formidable household. So I'm going to read this in particular. It says, sometimes people use respect to mean treating someone like a person. And sometimes they use respect to mean treating someone like an authority. And sometimes people who are used to being treated like an authority say, if you won't respect me, I won't respect you. And they mean, if you won't treat me like an authority, I won't treat you like a person. Now, this is obviously a statement that we don't have to get into here in a lot of fashions, but I just want to reiterate that sometimes when people take on authority, they sort of forget what respect from a subordinate looks like. It's not absolute devotion. It's not absolute attentiveness. It's not absolute respect, because they are sentient beings. People below us and people above us are sentient beings. And I think that is something that needs to be very clear and needs to be fleshed out, and it needs to be something that's addressed. And from acting like an authority, this is an issue related to Gen Zers. A lot of them tend to feel this way. And that's just part of it. But I do want to say that the idea of people being treated less when there are authority figures around may resonate with some people. So when we tell children to behave or do something, have we done the correct steps for them to respect us? Did we give them enough space? Do we prove that we aren't going to take away their fundamental rights? Have we making sure that we haven't taken away things that matter to them? Have we decided that we have had a base where they know that you are a safe person to be around and that you are a safe space? And if not, those are things that can be worked on and can be expanded upon. So there's that. I also want to talk about the difference between consequence and punishment. When you hear punishment, obviously you think, oh, like a slap on the wrist, or any sort of corporal punishment, really. So I think it tends to be more physical in our minds. And it also tends to be a lot more punitive than something that's a consequence. So when you have something that's a consequence, the punishment, first of all, usually implies an overhaul of consequences. So for an example, you stole cookies from the cookie jar. Now you're grounded for a week. Now, stealing cookies from the cookie jar doesn't necessarily equate to being grounded for a week. There's some correlation that should be said here. Causation and correlation. The punishment, or the consequence rather, must fit whatever misbehavior or crime has been committed. So there has to be an equal and opposite reaction to that, right? So we could also think about this, instead of punishment, thinking about something called natural consequences. So natural consequences usually teach lessons that are easier to understand, and they have more poignancy. So what I mean by this is, if a child forgets their jacket because they keep arguing that it's not cold, and I'm sure the parents in this in particular can understand that. I'm sure we've all had fights. I fight with my nieces constantly about putting jackets on because it is colder outside, and they argue, no, it'll be fine, right? So it can be annoying, but it can also be something that they are just practicing their autonomy. They're just practicing saying no, right? So if we practice for them saying no, then yes, they can keep that no. They can practice that no. But beyond that, if they forget their jacket, maybe you just bring the jacket along and they say, oh, it really is cold out here. Maybe I really do need my jacket. Then you can give the jacket to them. But it's for them to understand that every action has a consequence, and every reaction doesn't necessarily have to be exploitative or explosive. And that is something that I think that we all could agree on, that we want children to understand consequence, but not in a way where it is it they should kind of want the consequence. It's something that they should need, because without it they don't learn, right? So and I do want to say, this logic for natural consequences shouldn't be for life-threatening situations. So for example, if you're drinking and you decide to drink and drive, that's a natural consequence. No. But to understand, the power and cause and effect of actions is important. And I do also want to say, when you are talking about being an authority, you are responsible, especially if you're the authority, for setting the precedent with your child. You are the adult figure, you set the rules, right? So if you decide to act as an equal to them, and I don't mean equal in the sense that they are not worthy of being equal to you, it's that you are acting as if someone who is making decisions because you are more well informed than them, because they are a child and they are learning. You are the adult figure. So you set the precedent, you set the rules, you set the ideas, and you kind of steer the conversation, because the person who has the authority has more power in setting those consequences and in setting that precedent. So obviously children should respect their parents, but there are outliers. So, you will have a child, regardless of how well they've been raised, decide to say, very mean things to their parents. But the main point is that if it started from the beginning, it can be a lot more helpful and to be a more fruitful relationship than if it started halfway through their life, right, to adulthood. So those are the kinds of things to keep in mind. So we can sort of talk about the power imbalance continued. What I do sort of want people who are listening to this, I want them to come up with equal understanding relationships. Now, what does this mean? And I think that this is different than being equals in a relationship, because we all have different roles that we play, right? But an equal understanding relationship essentially means that you understand equally what your roles are. So, for example, I have quite a few here, but if you can make your list on your own, that would be great. And we're talking about what this looks like. For me, I think it could be a healthy superior and subordinate relationship. So, where this sort of plays in is they understand your work, your superior, they respect your creativity, they understand when things can go wrong and they may go wrong, and they may understand the mistakes you make and give you other chances to make things right while not belittling you when you make mistakes. So that's sort of what an equal understanding relationship example would look like. For a mother and a daughter, um, I I know for when I was growing older, I became more of a friend to my mom than I was a daughter, but we're still mother and daughter. So we are like friends, but we do understand that there are certain subjects and comments that not should be made from one party to the other. You are close, you understand each other, but you also know the limitations of having a parent-child relationship. So, once you get older, there is a point where you can see your parents as equal, but depending on where you are in life, I'm 25, my mother is going to be 60 soon. So it's sort of there's sort of a balance between what can be said and what cannot be said, considering on life stages, right? So the next thing is this is probably the easiest to have an equal understanding of, or I would argue the hardest because they are your equal. So you have different expectations for these kinds of relationships. So a friend and a friend, right? Or a boyfriend and a girlfriend. These should be equal relationships and equal understanding relationships. You both get along and are there for each other, but you also understand limitations of the other person. For example, if they have a job, then you work around their schedule while they work around yours. This is probably easiest to express your needs because they are your equal in this certain social situation. There is nothing at stake professionally, and you treat them with respect, but it's different because you don't have to be so careful in your word choice, and you can make mistakes more with friends because there's nothing at stake when you make mistakes, and they respect your no's. And respecting your no means saying no to drinking, saying no to smoking something, saying no to certain things, right? So we have all these in particular. Oh, I have something in the chat. Okay. All right. We'll look at the chat later. So respecting your no's does mean a lot of different things. And it really just means respecting boundaries, essentially. So what do these all have in common? What does this power imbalance, all of these relationships have in common? You understand them. You know who you are. You are able to express your needs effectively and are able to gain more due to that understanding. And this sort of relationship is symbiotic. You're building each other through your positions and your circumstance. So it's not just that one person is putting in the effort, it's that both parties are putting in the effort to make this work, to make this become something that can flourish, and given a goal or an outcome, can come that goal or outcome. So there's that. We are moving on to the next thing, but before then, I do have the website here as well to talk about parenting and saying your child is not your equal and why you have to be the boss. It obviously sounds a lot more like, well, I want to be friends with my child, but it talks about like the limitations that you can have while fostering a lot of those good, healthy, come to me for anything relationships, right? So there's that. All right, next slide. Okay, so we're going to sort of be talking about this for a little bit. I do want to say that when I sort of looked at this the first time, I didn't really understand what they meant. But now I kind of realize that there are different aspects to it, right? So a study that was shown, I don't have the link here, but I do have the link in the resources. And what the study shows is that when you talk to your children, depending on the range in which you talk to your children, changes the formation of their brain, right? So it changes the various synapses and various connections. And what I sort of alluded to earlier was that we change our words and behavior based on the relationships we have. But the words we use and the tone we use them in are very important. And this link here basically says, and I have a quote here that says, in fact, research shows that yelling may be as harmful as aggressive discipline. Sure, your child may listen in the short term, but if you want your child to develop the skills he needs to regulate his own behavior, speaking nicely is clearly the better way to go. Now, this sort of is like this new age parenting concept that you don't say no, you just say no in a different way kind of thing. But I do sort of want to reiterate the points that because the brain is still forming with children, their love maps are still kind of being formed up until the age of 7. So, what is a love map? A love map is basically what it looks like for them, for people who love them and who they love. And based around that, if their parent or their people that they're around are constantly yelling at them and constantly saying negative things to them, they perceive that as love because that is part of their love map. If your parent or if your guardian is part of your immediate love map, then you expect them to protect you, to take care of you, right? But a 6-year-old can't have those kinds of words, but that's the expectation. And if the child is surrounded by people who are part of their love map that don't treat them the way that they need to be treated to have a healthy forming body and brain, then they start to associate negative behaviors with their love maps and it affects their relationships later on in life. Which that doesn't mean that, if we're not perfect, we yell at our children, we get excited, we get exhausted. Those are all things that are part of being a parent and being someone that works with children, right? But when we do say something that hurts, or when we do say something that may change the formation of a child's brain, then we need to correct those sorts of things, right? So if we say, oh, I may have said that you are, for example, saying that you are acting crazy, right? Children don't like to hear that they're crazy because crazy means that you need medicine, right? So, for example, saying, I didn't mean that you were acting crazy in the way that crazy people are portrayed. I just meant that you were acting not like your normal self. So let's sort of talk about that kind of thing. So it starts to reframe what you're saying, and you're still getting the message across, but you're getting it across differently to where it enters a different part of their logic, and therefore they are able to absorb the information better. So there's that. I will be talking about something on the next slide that I think is important and is something that um, that will sort of change the way we look at words and the way children's brains are working. So I did want to just put a heads up on that. But before I go on to the next slide, I do want to say that when you give them words and when you talk to them in ways that change their love map, give them words that expand their introspectiveness. So even if you're just giving them words so that they have those to use later on in life. So for example, anatomically correct words. So, we say private parts, but if you say, what they actually are, then those children are more easily able to identify with adults and create conversations that may be hard for them and that may be hard for adults to have if they don't know the correct terms the child is using. Also, emotions are complicated, so children should know those types of words. Despair, elated, grief, exceptional. All those things are words that expand on just sad and happy, right? And sad and happy are good words. They're important words, but they're not the only words that sort of have those meanings and those connotations. There are a lot of words that have those connotations. So to make sure that you have all of the tools to give to them so that they can use their words correctly when interacting with adults is truly important. Now, I will be touching upon children and how they are resilient. They are resilient. Children can go through a lot of things and they can survive them very easily. And it seems like they forget. It seems like they're not affected by the things that happen to them. But in reality, their body remembers. And I will sort of touch upon this in a second. But yes, when you have something called, or when you have a traumatic experience or something that has happened to you that may change the formation of your brain, their like the memories are stored in a different area. So if it's traumatic, they may not remember it, but their body starts to remember. Their body is influenced by their brain. So their brain makes decisions based around that, right? So I have something under one of the bullet points called ACEs. ACEs actually is called adverse childhood experiences. And ACEs is something that uh, has been around for a while, but the concept has really pushed its way into the mainstream in public health in the past 10 years. So there was a study that was done by a doctor named Dr. Falittle, I believe. I'm so sorry if I'm saying his name wrong. Falitley, possibly. And he worked in a weight loss clinic. So he was working in a weight loss clinic and he found that his clients were not meeting their weight loss goals. In fact, some of them were going over the weight that they had started when they entered the weight loss clinic. And he kept saying, why is it that more than 50% of these people are not exceeding their weight loss plan? What is happening? So this really frustrated him and he started to look at the correlation. So he did some counseling with them. He sort of understood what the problems were. And he said, and he had found that 50% that did not succeed in their plan, a good majority of them have been abused at some point in their formative years. Now, what does that mean? That means that if you have a traumatic experience when you were young, if there is not intervention that leads to the formation for when you're an adult, your body starts to remember things and is constantly in survival mode. Now, what does survival mode mean, especially for this weight loss clinic? It meant that when you're in survival mode, your body searches for things that it can survive on. It doesn't search for the most nutritious stuff. It searches for the rare stuff that has, that you can make a lot of fat on your body so that you can survive in the mode that you're in, right? So it searches for sugars. It searches for high dense carbohydrates, not very healthy proteins. So all those sorts of things he had found was that their brains are gravitating towards these things that are not good for them because our survival brain would want those things. Our survival brain would want to say, oh, sugar is rare. Sugar helps me. Sugar leaves a lot of fat on my body. And therefore, because I'm in survival mode, I will take those calories. I will take that stuff because I don't know when I'm going to have it again. Now, that is obviously a big sort of claim to make, and something that may be difficult for some people to understand, that your body does remember these types of things, but it is true. And there's a lot of empirical evidence behind it. I have some books listed for you if you would like to learn about more. There's a really good book called The Body Keeps Score. I have the link to the Audible on here. It is a phenomenal listening and a phenomenal read as well. I also have a connection here that you can click on. It's called acesconnection.com. It's a blog, but it is this person who is educated in ACEs and furthers a lot of the claims that I make here today. And also, your children are resilient. They remember a lot of things, but once again, children also remember if their parents aren't doing well. So for example, if you grew up with a parent that was clinically depressed, or if you grew up with a parent who has a lot of anxiety, those are the types of things that still affect children in a way that we don't know about until they become much older. So if you have a child with a nervous parent or a really anxiety ridden parent, they start to become anxious. They start to do things that perfect their behavior, so their parent doesn't get mad at them or doesn't get anxious with them. So there are a lot of things, there are a lot of layers here. And I say this with that ACEs aren't small stuff, but if you're there for the small things, like the small troubles at school, the worries about friendship, all the things that we think are small compared to what adults deal with, those troubles that are brought forth to a parent or a guardian that is treated with respect, that treats them with dignity, that treats them with a sense of comfort and protection, then they will come to you for the bigger stuff like self-identity, trauma, and hard life experiences. So, as I said before, and I had alluded to, words matter when you're teaching children anatomically correct words, as well as emotions that are complicated. So keep those all in mind. If anyone would like to expand or me to expand on ACEs, you can reach out to me as well. This is not something that I am an expert in, but it is something that I have done a lot of research on, and I do know people that work in the ACEs field that I could refer to you as well. So there's that. So next thing we have is age matters. And I have here a blog, Age by Age, getting your kid to talk. It talks about the formative years. It talks about the years in which they're pre-adolescent and then adolescent and then going towards high school age, almost to a full-fledged adult. So while we talk about the power of positivity, the age of kids also matters, and how we talk to them matters. So if you're talking to a pre-adolescent child and you're talking to them like a baby, that doesn't necessarily help them understand what you're trying to say. And it also makes them feel kind of patronized. And we don't want that, right? We want a lot of things that are helpful for these types of things. And I'll click on it really quickly just so you guys can see what it sort of looks like. It does talk about age, preschoolers, little kids, big kids, and it has some videos in between. So I think it is actually a very helpful resource. And I also think that it's not just parents that could benefit from a lot of these scenarios. I think it's also people who work with children, right? And I don't know who has many friends who have children, but I am 25, which means that a lot of my friends are around my age, and they're either just starting to have children or are thinking about having children or are not thinking about having children at all. But we're all pretty much at the beginning stages of our sort of parenting journeys, right? And interacting with children. So I sort of wanted to talk about how the words matter, the things matter like that. But I do have videos that sort of reiterate the points that I'm trying to make, and I will start playing those now. Okay, not that one. Excuse me. So first one I have here is, it's actually from a YouTube channel called How to Adult. And I find it kind of funny because it was kind of created for this millennial outlook, this Gen Zer sort of time frame where people are sort of maturing later or deciding to have kids later, and life experiences that happened before then are more relevant to them. So here I have the video for anyone that would like to watch it.
Whenever possible, get down on the child's eye level when you're speaking with them. Kneeling, crouching, or just bowing down a little bit to be on the child's eye level when you're introducing yourself will make a huge difference, I promise. You'll instantly seem less intimidating and more like a friend. Number 4, when meeting older children, anywhere from 5 to 13 years old, especially girls, please don't just comment on their appearance. I know it can be a common impulse, and sometimes it is for me too, but I think we as adults need to really be conscious about how we're speaking to our kids. And especially when we're speaking to girls, we need to make sure that they know that they're valuable for more than just their appearance. If you feel like you need to tell them they're pretty or compliment them in some way, that's fine. Just don't make it everything you say to them. A few things you could say to younger kids are, I really like the color of your shirt. Is that your favorite color? Or, wow, your hair's in a really fancy braid. Did you do that yourself? Or my personal favorite, wow, those shoes look like they're really good for running fast. Can you show me how fast you can run in them? And when you're speaking with older children, go where they are. By that I mean, if they want to talk about dinosaurs, talk about dinosaurs. If they want to talk about princesses or robots or what they're learning in school, talk to them about that. And be really interested. If you give them a few undivided minutes of your time, you'll build a connection and they'll feel like you really listened. Plus, they'll be much more willing to step back for a few minutes when it's time for you to chat with their parents or caregivers. And finally, keep a sense of humor about you. Sometimes I like to think that being around kids gives me an act strange or silly anytime I want free of judgment card. Keep in mind that any child you meet might feel like dressing up like a monkey that day, or might want to do cartwheels all the way down the street while you're walking with their parents. Children don't have the same self-conscious hang-ups that we adults do, and therefore they might do something a little weird or act totally silly sometimes. And that's awesome. You could be making a totally weird face at a baby or dancing and singing a silly song with a 3-year-old, and no matter where you are, if people are giving you funny looks, you can just say, hey, I'm not weird, I'm just playing with the baby. That's one of the best parts about being around kids, honestly, is being totally weird and goofy with them and having the best excuse. So those are all the tips I have for you today. If you have any more questions about kids or parenting in general, please leave a comment down below. And thank you so much to the How to Adult team for having me on as a guest.
Okay. So that is one in particular YouTube video that I really like. I also like the channel a lot. I think that what it sort of reiterates is that not everyone, even if you're an adult, is comfortable around children. And I think that's something that, especially in prevention education, I forget, because I am comfortable around children. I've been around them. I've been an aunt since I was 9 years old. So I love being around kids. I love the idea of being around children. So sorts of those things don't come naturally to some people. And I think that really helps with it. But I do want to take one of those tips, especially, and talking about, I know that with younger kids, we can sort of dance with them and play with them, and that's great. But talking to children can be a little bit more difficult, right? And making them feel comfortable can be kind of hard. So I do want to talk about another YouTube channel called Hi Ho Kids, HIHO Kids. And they talk about a lot of not necessarily taboo subjects, but subjects that don't get a lot of attention. For example, they take these kids and they have them meet different people. And as simple as that sounds, there was one in particular where I find was very poignant. These kids met a former drug user, sorry, and it was something that I didn't know I needed to watch, because when you talk about prevention education, you're teaching a lot about these skills and a lot about what to say no to, and a lot about how it interacts with your brain and your body, but you don't know someone always that has the firsthand experience. And this in particular video was a child, and they were talking to a 15-year-old that had just gotten out of rehab for using heroin. So it was obviously it doesn't always happen, but it's a video that I highly recommend watching. So taking that into consideration, when we're talking about the video that we just watched, she says that talking to children, kind of go with the flow on what they sort of point out. And if you have that base of making them comfortable, it's so much easier to get them to talk to you in the future. So this one is actually kids meet a 101-year-old. And so I think that a lot of people, especially when they're talking to younger children, claim that the age gap is there, and they claim that they just don't know how to connect with younger children. And I say, yeah, some of it is true, but also I think that we could all make efforts to understand younger children, especially when we're not around them all the time. And these kids are 6 and 7 years old, and they're meeting a 101-year-old. So there's obviously a few generations gap there, but it still makes a point that no matter how old you are, you can still talk to kids and have somewhat of a meaningful conversation, but also just something to make them feel comfortable.
That's true.
That is not fair.
No.
What is your job?
Oh, my job was teaching in a college, but I retired a long time ago. I taught biology, and if you look at my shirt, you'll see some of the things I taught about. Could you possibly know what this one is?
Oh, that's a spider.
Oh, wonderful.
What's your favorite insect?
Ants. I did research on ants. But you know what an ant looks like, don't you?
Yeah, it's like this tiny. Mm-hmm. They can carry a big thing like a banana. Like 3 of them can, even though they're this tiny.
You're very good, and you're only 6 years old.
What do you like to do for fun?
Well, right now I'm watching the Olympics, and I write books. I do puzzles. I enjoy email. I write to a lot of friends. I even play Scrabble. Do you know how to play Scrabble? No?
No.
You should ask somebody to play Scrabble. It's lots of fun. Also, I try to get exercise every day.
Every day?
Yep.
Good.
Some old people aren't very well anymore.
Yeah.
Some of them can't remember things. Some of them are really lame and they have to have somebody help them. But I can do everything myself.
That's good.
And that's good.
And that means you're really old, but you're really good at it.
Yeah, and I enjoy life.
Okay. So I always like it because one, the children are adorable, but 2, they're really good at interacting with people that are different than them. And I think that they're sort of an example of how children should interact with different communities that aren't necessarily people that they see every day. So I just wanted to sort of reiterate that point. Now we're going to move on, but if anyone would like these videos or these slides, I can give them away. It doesn't matter. So while age matters, online gaming also plays a part in the peer pressure of things. Sometimes children create their own peer pressure. Everyone looks like this. Everyone is doing this. Sort of the dancing videos and the vlogging are parts of this as well. And it becomes difficult to kind of have those conversations with children, especially when they're being influenced by so much. But I did talk about giving access to technology and things like that. But I also want to say that social media does play a part in having something called an obtainable life, right? So I I put the Grinch Who Stole Christmas here just because I thought it would be relevant. And peer pressure has its own form of bullying, right? And I did want to put that here. So the Grinch Who Stole Christmas, there's a very simple form of bullying and peer pressure in the shaving scene that happens. He is being made fun of by this guy, the main bully, Augustus, who says you're too hairy for being a 6-year-old, and he starts to shave his beard. And one, it's really sad because he changes who he is, but two, it's a very simplistic form of bullying, right? That's one that is very easily identifiable. The peer pressure there is very easily identifiable. But it's also in this day and age, because things have evolved, it's also talking about, and more than just looks, you kind of have so many other parts, right? It's not that you have to look like someone and act like someone. It's sort of that you have to become them in a weird way. You have to become the best dancer so that you can look like your favorite TikTok star. So there are a lot of other parts to it. And I think that the words matter, the keeping aces intact matters because it informs how children interact with social media and their new forming belief systems as they grow older. So as they grow older, they start to question their inner wealth and their inner being. And if we can sort of mitigate how they question that and what they come across, then I think those are really important things to reconsider. So as I said before, how does this relate to peer pressure? Because we kind of have been talking about just these experiences and having conversations, but everything said and done here is related to peer pressure. So what you do and feel matters to children. What they feel around them, what their environment is like, it matters to children, especially since we are in the holiday season. It's kind of hard to not give into the weird pressures around us, right? So what makes our children any different? If we're stressed out by the holidays, then children are stressed out by the holidays. They feed on the stress. They're sort of the sponges for that. And power dynamics matter. So when we sort of talk to them and we use words that matter and use words that are good and formative to their brains, then hopefully we can sort of mitigate some of that peer pressure. So I do just want to come with closing statements. I have a quote here that says, we become what we are, excuse me for a second, we become what we are told we are. So if you say the same things to your child, they start believing them, right? Because that's the way that their brain forms. That's how their love map sort of becomes. And because children listen constantly to what we are and who we are, positivity is important. I think that there can also be a point where you're too positive and it sort of doesn't address some of the core issues that children face. But having a balance of positivity is really important. And addressing things when they come up is very important as well. So if children come to you for small things like saying, oh, he keeps pulling my hair or things like that on the playground, then that is something to be addressed, because if it's not intervened in early ages, people start to think that certain things are okay. And when we listen to little voices, it helps us understand them, but also who we are. And it makes us gentler people when we interact with them too. And the older they get, the less we will be in their lives, but they know that you are the person to come to if we have sort of done what needs to be done, right? And so I do have a news article here that says young children are especially trusting of things they're told. And it is very true that if they're so trusting of that, of course they become the things that they're told, right? So I just have resources here. That's all I have for today. But thank you for being here. Thank you for your presence and your willingness to learn more. We're done. Thank you. So let's stop share.
Were you asking if we had any questions?
Yes. So any questions?
Well, I had missed, I would say, about like 15 minutes of the discussion. And I was wondering if I'm trying to figure out where I left off actually. But I think we actually left off at the portion about like where the kids will actually process certain commands or demands differently. Like they take a positive and prefer it, and they run it through a negative spectrum as well. Do you mind going over that specifically, like such as like exactly like like is it something that normally changes like over a child's like early childhood to like adult like teenage years, or is it something that still applies for like all kids of the spectrum until they turn 18?
Okay, that is a good question, and thank you for asking that. Actually, children, our brains form up until 25 to 30. So really, when we are sort of absorbing these commands and demands, we learn how to mitigate just through our forming brains and multitasking and things like that. So yes, the age does matter. So when they're younger, the negative is harder to process, but when they're older, it is easier to process. But it still is confusing to adults as well as children. The other point to make, though, is that because we talk to children that way, would we talk to adults that way? Not necessarily, right? So it's sort of coming up with this balance that children have brains that are forming. They need to learn the skills to become better adults, to become, well-functioning citizens of society. But beyond that, we also have to sort of be gentle with the processes that we say them in. So the age does matter, but it also doesn't, because it's sort of a weird line to have there. But the formation of the brain does matter. So while it's forming, and the words that we use, the connections of negativity and positivity matter. So not just the no, don't, it's also changing the way that they would perceive the no, don't. So if you use the positive spins of the no and the don't, then they are able to process it differently so that they understand the commands better, because no and don't are absolute. That's pretty easy to understand considering. But if you give them the nuanced versions of it and the positivity versions of it, they learn more, and they are given reasons as to why they can't do certain things. So yes, it matters, but also just coming up with positive terms instead of the no and the don't probably would be easier for them to understand later in life. Thank you for the question. Anything else? Okay, thank you, Barbara. I think we're good. Barbara?
Yes, okay. Thank you. I will end the recording now.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it.